I have played the demo for Nier. Oh, I'm sorry, excuse me. What I meant to say was, I have played the demo for Stellar Blade, a game that a lot of people are comparing to the clearly superior Nier Automata. And since I don't want to insult the developers over at Platinum Games, I'm going to do my best to avoid drawing comparisons between this game and that game. Because Stellar Blade has about as much in common with Nier Automata as Nier Automata has in common with, a Call of Duty title. That's how little these two games have in common. So as mentioned previously, I did play the demo for Stellar Blade. I spent over an hour with it. It's not a very long demo. You can get through it probably within, I want to say 40 minutes, 40 or so minutes. I thought the opening sequence was good until you see this character being pulled out of her pod here. Because, the developers go out of their way to basically objectify their main character. And, as I started getting into the combat, and the game literally throws you in almost immediately, some interesting thoughts started to pop into my head, like, why is everything so, I don't know, slow? And then I thought to myself, it's not just the combat either. Like, I tried to veer off, to the side over here, and for whatever reason, the game wouldn't let me do that. So I'm like, okay, so, the game is funneling me along the path that it wants me to go. I can't go and explore wherever I want. I wonder if the rest of the game is like that. And then they put in some platforming thing where you have to jump over this structure that fell down on the beach. And I'm like, okay. And then I noticed how clunky and, I don't know, kind of rushed the animation is. And then I'm thinking to myself, well, you have these alien things and they're fighting these females that have just dropped down out of these pods. And I noticed that how there's not a single male character on this beach right here. They're all women. I wonder how the so-called right-wing crowd is going to react to that, since they like to throw the word woke at everyone who has a slither of criticism against anyone who deems this game to be, I don't know, kind of stuck in the past with the way it treats its female characters. So it seems like, there's some feminism going on in this game, right? Where's all the male characters at? But anyway, I'm continuing forward, and I find myself fighting, 3 different enemies at once. And then it hits me. That's when it occurs to me that this is not a hack and slash game. This game is a Souls-like knockoff. The lock-on is pretty much the same. It's mapped to the same button, just the same as a Souls-like game would place its targeting button on the controller with R3. It seems impossible to fight a wave of enemies at the same time, and now all of a sudden it's starting to make sense. Because I did see that little comparison that IGN made with this game, saying it's like Sekiro Shadows Die Twice. And I didn't really understand that. I didn't really understand that comparison until deeper into the demo, but I'll get to that. So I'm still playing the game, and, I'm continuing forward, pressing forward. I'm like, how come I can't sprint? Where's the sprint button? Then the prompt for it pops up on screen, and I'm like, okay, finally, I'm not sure why I wasn't able to do that the first time, but, as I'm playing through, I'm starting to use the dash button a little bit, because I'm like, is this how fast this character moves? This is their sprint animation? And in my head, I'm thinking, why is everything moving so slow? The combat feels slow. The climbing mechanics for the platforming feels slow. The sprint animation is slow. I haven't seen a single male character in this game at all. And I'm thinking to myself, the game, it looks good, right? Graphically, I don't have anything to complain about. The character models look great. The textures for the hair and the costumes and everything, the environments, all the effects going on, different environmental hazards like fire. All of it looks like a modern game should. So why is everything else so, what's the word, mediocre? So after a cutscene with some girl talk, some pep talk, I pull up the menu and I can't help but notice how the main character looks like some kind of fake action figure that you would buy in the toy section at Walmart for $10. But moving on from that, I take a look at the skill trees. And I see some interesting stuff, like beta energy. And I couldn't help but chuckle a little bit to myself, because it seems that this entire game was aimed at those who have beta energy. Then I scroll down to the attack section, and I'm taking a look at some of these combo attacks, and I'm like, you know what? I have some issues with this game so far, but okay, Stellar Blade, some, combo attacks that's given to you right away. I mean, where was this in Final Fantasy 16, right? That game only had one base combo attack, a simple 4-string, combo. This game has what you should expect from an action game, right? And I'm seeing things like perfect parries and, different things of that nature. I'm seeing like knockdown recovery moves and what have you. And so I'm like, okay, this seems to be a competent action game, right? Well, I'll get to that. Anyway, back to this boss fight. So I'm just playing around with like the animations and everything, trying to get a feel for, whatever the hell this is and, what the developers have intended for this game to be. And it didn't really click with me just yet. I was still trying to play this game like it was a hack and slash game. Because, that's what it looks like, right? It looks like a hack and slash game. But it's not a hack and slash game. If you were to compare this game with Devil May Cry or Bayonetta, because, I thought this game, just from the little snippets of gameplay that have been shown in the trailers, I thought it was going to be, something akin to Bayonetta. But I was wrong. I was dead wrong. And you won't really pick up on that until you actually play it for yourself. And I'm glad that this demo was released so I could draw a more accurate comparison. And so I complete that boss fight, and we get this strange cutscene where this monster drops down, going forward a little bit. The first thing I notice about this thing is, its design. Seems like a normal design for a creature like this, except in the chest area. And I'm like, well, damn. I guess everything has a female presence in this game, right? It's very clear what kind of audience this developer is trying to sell this game to. And it's a very specific audience. One that's clearly male, one that is somewhat juvenile, and one that has, what did I showcase before in the skill tree? Beta energy, right? That's the kind of target audience that this game is clearly aimed at, but I digress. Finally, we get our first male character in this game. And I must say, this dude has the personality of a fucking statue. The motherfucker is just boring. And I'd imagine that this was done on purpose. Because in a game that was clearly made by man-children for man-children, the only way to make your boring female main character interesting is to make her male counterparts uninteresting. But I digress. So, I land in this new level, which has a very cliche and uninspired post-apocalyptic setting, and I just start busting out some combos, trying to get a feel of the combat. There's a word that keeps coming to mind, and that word is stiff. Why does everything feel so stiff when it looks so smooth? Like, this is a game where gameplay footage doesn't do viewers any favors. It's something where you literally have to play it for yourself in order to get what it actually is. Because if you look at something like this, it's easy to misconstrue it and claim that it's something akin to, Nier Automata. You look at these attack animations and you think, oh, it's a smooth like hack and slash game. But it's not. It's not either of those things. It's not smooth, nor is it a hack and slash game. So I'm just continuing forward here, fighting some random weak enemies, and then, I reached this new area. And then as I activated this so-called camp, I started trying to interact with it a little bit. The developers gave this character a spot to sit down, and it's called a rest spot. Then I'm greeted to this, cutscene from earlier in the game, from the intro, where our boring male companion saves the day. And I'm thinking to myself, this game has some interesting, science fiction designs and everything. And it's actually a shame. It's actually too bad that it's wasted on some garbage. Because, these designs, some of them, it seems like they deserve to be in a much better game than this. So I'm transported back to the game, and yeah, I'm just wondering, like, okay, so, what's going on? She's sitting down, nothing's happening. But I did notice that my healing items and, my health and everything, that replenished. And I thought, that's a that's a strange mechanic right there. Then I'm greeted by a new enemy, and I'm trying to use this perfect dodge thing, and I'm like, why is the dodge so fucking unresponsive? Because, I'm pressing the button for it, and it seems like it doesn't really want to work. And even as I, pull it off like one time, I'm left unsatisfied because I can't consistently do it over and over again. Because the game wants me to do it at the exact frame. If you're a frame too early or just a single frame too late, it will not work. I'm like, okay, that's fucking weird. So they've overcomplicated a combat system that's slow as hell for basically no reason. I'm not exactly sure which crowd this is aimed at from a gameplay perspective. Then I start taking a look at the environment and I'm like, huh, it seems like it's trying to copy off of Nier Automata, and I'm starting to understand where those comparisons are coming from. But the strange part is that the game doesn't seem to have an identity of its own, aside from that, separate from that. It's just gleefully copying off of Nier Automata's art direction. It's actually an insult to that game to try and say that Stellar Blade is like Nier Automata. It's like, no, it's not. And so they have some platforming here, and I'm playing around with that, and it's the same issue as before, where everything seems, I don't know, just kind of unfinished and rather slow. And then I reach, this small wave of enemies, and I die for the first time. But it's not even an actual death animation. There's nothing satisfying about it. The screen literally just fades to black, and you're greeted with the words, "You died." It's like, could you guys be any more lazy? That has to be the laziest death animation, or lack thereof, for any video game I've ever played in my life. Talk about being uninterested. And so I try again with this wave of enemies. And that's when it finally occurs to me. This game was not designed for the player to fight multiple opponents at once. You can only target one enemy at a time and deal with one enemy at a time. Kind of like a Souls-like game. And finally, IGN's comparison to Sekiro is starting to make more sense, but I haven't fully grasped as to how much of an accurate comparison that actually is. And so this other thing drops down. It looks like it has a mace on one arm and a sword on the other. And I'm trying to, play around with, some combos. I'm trying to use the dodge. And the game is just remarkably unresponsive. and I'm just lost for words at this point. And so, my health is going low. I use a healing item, and then I make another comparison that has me basically shaking my head in disapproval. The healing items in this game behaves in a similar fashion to what's akin to an Estus flask, kind of like a Souls-like game. And the targeting system and the speed of the combat seems to be akin to a Souls-like game. Huh. Then I run into another enemy similar to the last one that I fought, and then it whips out this grapple move. I try and spam the dodge button to avoid it, and that doesn't work. I'm picked up, and I'm just tossed down like a rag doll. There's no way to break out of the animation, and I don't know. It seems like something that you would see in a Souls-like game. And so finally, we have more platforming, and I don't know. Everything just feels sluggish and slow and just unsatisfying. But I will give the developers kudos for actually putting in, a swimming mechanic. Something that, believe it or not all developers feel like doing these days. Like, Capcom and Koei Tecmo and Team Ninja, but I won't get into that. And so I reach another one of these camp areas, and I rest my character, and my healing items are restored. I notice that it says the enemies respawn. And I'm like, that seems similar to a bonfire. Like, the camp is literally a bonfire. Like a Souls-like game, right? And so the comparisons are starting to become one too many. Then I reach this bug-like creature. It's like a bipedal ant with a strong arm, and I'm trying to get around this thing's defense. I don't know. It seems like it was just designed to be as annoying and as grating on your nerves as possible, with almost no window for the player to react. And I'm thinking to myself, at this point, this is not a hack and slash game at all. This is basically a watered down Souls-like game. Because even though it has different combo attacks and everything in there, there's too many gameplay mechanics and systems in here that were clearly inspired by the Souls-like genre. And I wasn't expecting that at all. And considering I despise the Souls-like genre and hate almost every single game in that genre, I actually now have less interest in this game than I did before I played the demo, which is remarkable. And I just started counting the comparisons on hand. The combat system is designed for you to fight one enemy at a time. The healing system with the items is akin to the Estus Flask system from the Dark Souls series. The camps are basically bonfires that replenish your health and respawns enemies. And so the comparisons at this point between this game and Nier Automata really don't make any sense. Because even though both are ARPGs, Nier Automata is more of a hack and slash action game, and this is more of a Souls-like action game, without it actually being a straight-up Souls-like. So I get to the next camp area, and I'm trying out this move, but I'm also playing around with the dodge system, and it becomes very clear to me that you can't play this game the way you want to play it. You have to play this game the way the game wants you to play it. There's not really any player agency that this game gives you to play this game the way you want to play it. Everything is based off of what the AI does, rather than what you can do, like a Souls-like game. Now, even though it's more flashy than a Souls-like game, and it has a lot more depth combo-wise than a Souls-like game, and there's much more going on in the combat system compared to a typical Souls-like game, the main DNA of this game regarding its combat system and other gameplay systems and mechanics were clearly taken from the Souls-like genre. And you cannot ignore that. You can't ignore that in the combat system. You have to react to what the AI does, rather than really taking the combat system into your own hands and being experimental with it. Everything is based off of what the AI chooses to do. So you have to meticulously watch exactly what the AI does. Otherwise, you're not going to succeed with this combat system. The game was not designed to have player agency in mind. So I reached the end of the demo, and I'm playing this boss, and if it wasn't clear before, it certainly is clear now. Everything is based off of, as I just explained, what the AI does. But not just that. IGN's comparison with Sekiro Shadows Die Twice in this game becomes all the more apparent in this boss fight. So the main thing with Sekiro was the parry system. If you couldn't get down the parry system, if you didn't like the parry system, that game was basically unplayable. The same case exists here with Stellar Blade. The entire combat system, especially when it comes to the boss fights, heavily emphasizes this parry mechanic. And it's to the point where the L1 button is literally the entire combat system. If you cannot get the parrying down, you will not survive any boss fight in this game. So for anyone who didn't like Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, this game is not for you. Don't let the flashiness of it all fool you. This is a watered-down Souls-like game that's aimed at that audience from a gameplay perspective. It is not a hack-and-slash game. It is not a smooth game to play, and it's very unresponsive. The game has very, very tight parry windows that, if you're off by just, once again, a slither of a frame, you will suffer heavy damage. That is unavoidable, because that's the way this game was designed. And considering that I've covered Sekiro Shadows Die Twice on this channel when that game came out, and I did finish the game, I only ever finished that game once. I never had the interest to go back and play it again. And I'm someone who usually likes to replay video games, if they're good enough to be replayed, which Sekiro was not. And the only reason I finished it is because I run this channel. I do not feel like playing or supporting what's basically a cheap imitation of that game. In all honesty, that's exactly what Stellar Blade is. It's a cheap imitation of other games that it's taking inspiration from, but it doesn't do enough to forge its own identity. They even have these grinding sections in this game, and I'm like, what is this game trying to be? Is it trying to be Ratchet and Clank now? I'm just like, what's going on with this? This is a weak, cheap imitation of other games that do what it's trying to do better. A game that's full of feminism, where the women are strong and capable and the men are basically just incompetent. In fact, it seems there's only one male character in this game. I haven't seen any other male character for any of the previews. So for all the talk of this game being a stance against the woke crowd, it seems that this game was made for the woke crowd, for the right wing and the ignorant, and those with low standards and a low level of intelligence. A game where, hey, you can play dress up with the main character and dress her in all these slutty outfits. Basically, a game that's style over substance. That's what Stellar Blade is, according to the demo that I played. Oh, but wait, there's more, because after you beat the demo, and the game developers try to entice you to purchase their mess, you unlock something called Boss Challenge, which has been added to the main menu. And what it is, Boss Challenge is basically a more upgraded Eve. You have the option to play through this boss later in the game. And once again, it becomes all the more evident that this game is just a cheap Souls-like. A cheap Souls-like that's copying off of Sekiro by placing heavy emphasis on this parry mechanic. But unfortunately, unlike Sekiro, this game has some issues with responsiveness, because you'll hit the parry button over and over and over again as you're being attacked, but the game will randomly decide if the mechanic actually wants to work or not. And you gotta deal with all of this in the middle of these slow and sluggish, combat animations that all goes back to the same word, and that is stiff. This is a very, very stiff game to play. And I don't think it's because the developer didn't know what they were doing. I think it's because they did know what they were doing, and they designed the game to be that way on purpose, because they've aimed this game at the Souls-like crowd. They just made it more flashy to make it appear that it's actually something better than a typical Souls-like. But it's not better than a typical Souls-like. It has some of the same issues that those games have. You're just given more options to work with by comparison. And so, I played through this battle over and over and over again and went through the same, trial and error bullshit phase that these Souls-like games and their, cheap clones, such as this game, tend to do. And after I finished it, I basically lost whatever slither of interest that I already had, which was basically already zero. And now I guess my interest is in the negative. Stellar Blade is a cheap imitation of a Souls-like game. It has very unresponsive controls. It is very, very stiff to play. From an art direction perspective, it's simply just copying off of Nier Automata, which is where that, comparison is coming from. But gameplay-wise, it's basically Sekiro Shadows Die Twice, just with more options in combat. But because the game is so stiff to actually play, and it's rather unresponsive, it has a very sharp learning curve that's going to be a turn-off for many. And if you've already played Sekiro, whether you like the game or not, you already know what you're getting. And so for those who bought Sekiro and didn't finish it, and that crowd is many, this is a game that you're probably going to want to avoid. If you bought Sekiro Shadows Die Twice and you did not finish it, do not buy Stellar Blade. This game was not made for you. If you're someone like myself who did finish Sekiro, well, you already know what you're getting. This game is another example of what's wrong with gaming in 2024. There's too many games that are being released that are just simply not living up to expectation. There's a lot of people that are excited for this game. And from a certain perspective, it's understandable. It's very flashy, it looks good graphically, but that's all it has going for it. To summarize, this game is another one of those games that's all style and no substance. It's not doing anything remotely interesting or new that I haven't seen in other action games of this type or otherwise. It looks like the story is going to be ridiculous, but clearly the story is not something that's the main draw for this game. It's the gameplay. And since the gameplay is not fun and it's very tedious, there's really no point. It would be a huge waste of money to give this company and Sony $70 for this nonsense. So for those in the community who are easily impressed by lavish graphics and, flashy, attack animations, basically people with low standards, this game is for you. But the funny thing about the people that I just described is that normally those people fall into the casual audience, and this game was definitely not made for casuals. None of the Souls-like games are made for casuals. And even though this isn't a straight-up Souls-like game, it has way too much in common with those games, with that genre, to simply overlook it. I think this game would be good for a rental, but not much else. I also was reading from those reacting to this demo online that apparently this game will not have a New Game Plus option on release, which is something that Sony has done with quite a few of their exclusives on PlayStation. They've made that mistake quite a few times with Horizon Forbidden West, God of War Ragnarok, and Spider-Man 2. And it seems that this game is also going to suffer from the same poor decision making in that regard. So there you go. Stellar Blade, coming out in late April. And now that you know what type of game this is, purchase at your own discretion. You've been warned.